got a member presentation from Thilashini Schmidt, who's a nationally accredited mediator, works with Informal Workplace Mediations, and is going to be sharing with us a presentation on facilitating workplace mediation, informal but effective intervention, which sounds very good. Now, before I proceed, I'd like to acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional custodians of country, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and emerging leaders throughout the country. So I might just hand over to you, Dilo.
Thank you, Jo. Thanks so much for that lovely introduction. Yes, I am Tilo, or Till. I'd love to chat to you today about workplace mediations. It is the area of specialty, I guess, in which I've had a lot of experience working in and am passionate around. So hopefully everybody can hear and see me okay. And I welcome everyone that's joining now. Hello. I'm going to, hopefully everybody can see the PowerPoint slide that I've already shared. Can everybody see that? Yep. Okay.
Yes.
Right. Fantastic. Thank you. So yes, today my topic is around facilitating workplace mediations, and I guess it is an area of great interest for myself, and obviously hopefully for all of you here today. I'm going to briefly talk and expand on that and the experience that I've gained working with Emverio and leading those workplace mediations from my own experience and perspective as well. But just sharing with you, how a workplace mediation actually functions and when it is mostly utilised and best utilised. So I just start off, I guess, with what actually is a workplace conflict. I think that's a really important place to start. What I guess differentiates a workplace conflict from other types of conflict. I think in particular with workplace conflict, it's something that is a sustained, unresolved sustained issue that is occurring between two or more employees. The most common are between two employees or staff members. They can be manager and reporting person to the manager. That can be employee to employee or peer to peer. So I guess the other thing is if it's really not possible for the two parties to be able to resolve it themselves. And I guess there's a significant impact on their health and well-being and how they can actually function and also, have productive results in the workplace. So that's, sort of where I think that's a good starting point in terms of where the workplace conflict that can arise between two people. So I feel that, facilitating workplace mediation as an intervention, it is best utilised when an employer wants to address that low-level conflict between the two parties or the two employees, and also, I guess, get them to try and build on some of those effective communication skills and other micro skills that are really important for having a effective workplace relationship. And that can come from a result of, just being, having very different personalities, obviously, is the number one thing. Having different communication styles, having different leadership styles, having just different styles of, I guess, conversing with one another, and it becomes a point of contention for them and creates that distrust, usually, lack of trust or distrust. Can impact, how effective they can actually manage their work, and also, really affects their, I guess, their enjoyment of going to work as well, because they spend, a considerable amount of time with this person or in the workplace with this person. It's, I think, a really important mediation to allow this sort of thing to be resolved in the workspace. So I think a lot of that is, it's an informal yet very effective intervention process for that reason. So as a mediator, a workplace mediator, you know, we are that independent third party, and we are being called, I guess, to be a part of that and to try and resolve that with the two participants, because the manager or HR representative is not able to. They may have tried other methods. They may have tried sometimes investigations. They might have tried an informal discussion with the two participants as well, but nothing's really impacted or created a change for them. So they generally then will call us, and you know, we can come on site and facilitate that mediation in person to, I guess, provide that expert or expertise and the skill sets that are required as an effective mediator. So I guess it's really, you know, all the things that we as mediators do, which is, you know, having that ability to listen openly and to create a safe space for the two people to have a very productive conversation around some of these issues or concerns that have arisen over some time. So I guess our job in that space is to, yes, create a safe space for them to be able to successfully, you know, try and de-escalate that situation for them. And that can only really come from a place of real understanding of each other. And so I think, you know, we come in as a pathway to having a peaceful resolution and a way to move forward and to look at the future focus outcomes that will assist them, you know, to do that and step into that kind of realm and change their perspective on how it's been for some time for them. And obviously the sooner the better, if you can get in there and do a mediation in that workspace earlier. Obviously that is much more productive, can still be productive, I guess, at the latter stage. But I think what we're finding is if you come in earlier on, you can prevent a lot of the escalations that can occur as a result of having that go without any sort of proper intervention or effective intervention. So this leads me to, I guess, a bit of a question I can pose to all of you today. I guess there are different types of conflicts that you can encounter in the workplace, and my question to you all is, what are some of the types of conflict you've encountered in your workplace? To hearing any ideas or personal circumstances where you've experienced that. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it doesn't have any suggestions.
Audience participation time.
That's it.
Yeah, Leonie.
I've currently got a situation where there's been a total breakdown between the CEO of an organisation and the board. The CEO very much thinks that the board is against them. The board thinks that the CEO is not being compliant with what they should be doing. And all communication is actually really counterproductive to the situation that they're both in.
Yeah, that's a really a good example, Leonie. Thank you for sharing. I think you know, there's obviously layers, and I think a lot of these you know, conflict situations can have layers, and if it's what we have to determine and what requesters of mediation have to determine is whether it's suitable for a workplace mediation, or does it impact more on the realm of, you know, improper conduct or breach of, you know, code of conduct. And that will obviously deem it probably not a likelihood for mediation as such, but maybe a more serious intervention process like an investigation or so forth. Having said that, you know, as I said earlier, you can still start with an investigation and then follow up with a mediation. But it's harder to build a level of trust and I guess willingness, I suppose, because again, you know, you want participants to be a part of a mediation willingly, and obviously that's that can have some impact on that. So it is about just, you know, being very curious and trying to understand what the situation is and whether a mediation is suitable, and that will be, I guess, dependent on how, you know, how actively they want to participate in mediation as well.
Yeah. You look like you, yeah.
This has really come from I was going to say a breakdown in communication, but actually not good communication right from the word go, which has meant that it's grown to now total total lack of communication and a lack of understanding by
Yeah.
both parties about what the actual nub of the issue is.
Yeah. So I think you've hit the nail there. I think it is definitely when there isn't any real understanding or want to understand. So mediation would be a great platform for them to share, basically their impacts and where they're coming from and how they want each other to understand, where they are actually standing in this particular situation. So sharing that will be really have that positive benefit of trying to enhance the level of understanding that they have. And if they're not able to communicate effectively in order to understand, that's where I guess a mediator's skill set would be really, really helpful. And the process of mediation would be really helpful. We also do group mediation. So if there's more than two participants, and it's more looking at then the future focus of how they want to move forward with this, because clearly it's not sustainable, obviously, to have that kind of butting of the heads or lack of understanding and lack of communication. It's just going to get worse or deteriorate. Yeah.
Yeah. What I often see, Tillo, is that there's been maybe several attempts at resolving things internally. And it's kind of not, or maybe made things worse. I don't know if that's something you see a fair bit.
Yeah, look, yes, yes, sometimes it is the case, and that's where, I think I mentioned earlier that if you can, mediation would be a good first step to try and resolve it if it is, definitely not in the realm of serious misconduct, that sort of thing. So if it is that low level conflict that is around, lack of communication or breakdown in communication and breakdown in trust, yes, if we can get the mediation happening sooner rather than later after several things have been tried, maybe, internally, it can sometimes, it can have a detrimental effect in the level of trust that the individuals can have towards another process. So, and it's quite taxing emotionally for them. So, to preserve their mental health and well-being and being really aware of that, I think it's such an effective way of dealing with that, to be able to provide them a safe space to be able to talk through their issues as part of a mediation. Yeah. Any other areas of conflict that anybody else has experienced in the workplace that they want to share?
Very often joined in now. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, look, I suppose the one that I see often is where you have leaders who are task oriented and people in their team who are looking for more relationship connection. So you have somebody who's go on the task and somebody who's very particular in what their needs are, and it's like two diametrically opposed sets of needs creating conflict.
Yeah, that's a really common one that we do see. Thank you for sharing that one. I think it's again, trying to understand it from each other's perspective. So if there is a different style of working, then I guess it's just sharing that, that the differences and why there are those differences, but also coming to a shared understanding of how, there's pros and cons to certain things, but mostly, you can work together even if you're very different in your style. And just finding that middle sort of pathway or the middle ground. And often, if people are able to share where they're coming from and enhance the level of understanding of each other, they can generally work towards a solution that is going to kind of meet both needs now that there is more awareness and understanding around it. Yeah. Thank you. All right, I'll just flick to the next slide if that's okay. There's nobody else that wanted to make a contribution at this point. I'll just move on to the next slide. Give me a click. There we go. So I guess the common types of workplace conflict that we often see is there's personal disagreements, I guess, is a main one around the workplace relationship. Just or even professional disagreements, personal and professional disagreements create, impacts on the types of workplace relationship conflict there is. And I think that's quite a common one. The other one that's quite common is, having a clear understanding of what their roles and responsibilities are. Sometimes the role description isn't clear, or it's they're feeling like it's not included, or it's outside the scope of the role description. So it's really, that can create a lot of conflict, because the boundaries of what that role entails are not clear, and they need to be clarified to, I guess, minimize the level of misunderstanding that can arise from that. So that is a really good starting place, is to have a real understanding and a real clarity on what their role is, and what their responsibilities are. And if there's any, grey areas or ambiguity, the mediation can serve as a really great platform to be able to really clarify that, And I think another one is just processes in the workplace. So just having, again, and that sort of intertwines with the roles and responsibilities, but what are the processes that are in place, and are the two parties in agreement or understanding of what that actually looks like, in order to achieve the desired goal. Generally, the goals are the same or very similar. It's just how they get there, and that's probably a thing that can differ, is the process, or the process that they undertake might differ. So again, it's understanding if there is maybe a process handbook or something like that, going over that and really understanding, what the differences are, if there are any. So yeah, again, it comes down to, being able to communicate on these things. Another common thing that we see is a feeling of undermining, and that, I guess, is can be conveyed through communication, the language used, the tone used, and I guess it is the individual perception of what that feels like for them, and it may not be the intention of the other person at all, but it's just the way that they come across in their language or their tone when they are communicating. It could be verbal or email, or both. Often, a lot of misunderstandings arise from email communication. A lot of the time it's, understood that if they spoke face to face or in person, that would alleviate a lot of the misunderstandings or misconceptions, because you can, I guess, read overall body language better, rather than, the tone of an email can sometimes be unintentionally coming across as, rude or abrupt or whatnot. So yeah, so that is quite a common one that we see, is that feeling of being undermined by the other person. And of course, that goes also hand in hand with feeling, respected and having sort of professional interactions. Perception is a big one. I guess a perception is personal to that person. And as I often say in my mediations is, we can have different perceptions of each other, and it is usually a consequence of, the interactions, the behaviour that has been, undertaken or received. So a perception can be changed if we can, again, enhance our level of understanding of each other. And I think perceptions can shift when there is an ability to see from the other person's, perspective, as well as your own, and share your own. And generally, the mediation is such a nice way of feeling heard, but also trying to understand where that other person is coming from. And then oftentimes you'll see that two people can shift their perspective of what the current situation is, and move towards something that is more results or solution focused, I suppose. Skills are obviously, that's the main reason why they generally find themselves in a level of conflict with the other person, is that maybe there is a lack of communication skills, or there are some certain barriers that they're not even, understanding. So it's really unpacking that and spending the time to unpack the actual reason for the conflict. And that really comes, when you explore the issue in great detail with them. And that usually is difficult to articulate or understand when you're in the middle of a workplace scenario. But I think also with that is a lot of the things that we're seeing is communication also around feedback, being able to give, but also being able to receive feedback is another big one. So they're, I guess, the most common areas, but obviously there's a multitude of areas, but they all sort of revolve around, something along those lines. Now, I guess in terms of addressing the conflict, a lot of people or employees, they tend to either ignore it or avoid each other, which is not good. Obviously, it is a temporary solution, but it's certainly not something that is, something that can be maintained for a long time. It creates sort of that really toxic workplace culture. So I guess, so we want to be able to address those conflicts so that people can actually, face each other and talk to each other about the potential issues or concerns they have. And there's leave, leave is a big one that they go on stress leave. They go on, leave to kind of avoid the situation, but, because it's just so awful, they generally feel really awful. It's mentally weighing on them, it's affecting their sleep and all those things. So, just it has major impact. That's another, you can get them to have some leave, maybe to just sort of decompress for a little while, but then, at what point do they come back and have to address the conflict? That's probably where mediation, generally we do mediation, workplace mediations when people are returning from extended leave. And that's also a helpful tool or step to have that mediation, to help them return back to work and integrate that. Another issue we find is when they start to talk to others, so they're not talking directly with the person they have the conflict or the issue with, and they're talking about it indirectly, so through other people in the team or other staff members, and that again creates a toxic workplace culture, whether it's gossiping or whether it's, all those things. The best thing is to talk about it with that person, directly in a safe environment and a confidential environment. And if they can't do that themselves, then that's where I guess a workplace mediation can afford that for them. And oftentimes, I guess, if there is certain conflict, it can escalate to something that management have to get involved in. Obviously, by the time a mediation is also organised, it is something that is being flagged to management that there is an issue, and they've tried to de-escalate the issue to the best efforts, but obviously it hasn't been successful, so that now they're looking at something informal yet still effective to, I guess, manage and de-escalate the issue there. From there on, I guess it can become a formalised complaints process. We often get mediations on the back end of a formal complaints process, which is, again, it's a difficult space to work in as a mediator because, again, there's a breakdown in trust and potentially, their trust in the workplace or an employer as well is can be impacted if they haven't got the outcome that they were seeking through making a formal complaint. Sometimes they don't see the value of the mediation as being the suggested outcome from the complaint. Or often, a lot of feedback I do tend to get from participants is that I wish we had done this sooner rather than later. I wish we had have done this intervention at the onset of the conflict, when we raised this issue with our manager or formalise it with our manager. Yes, so I guess then, it's really about having a clear framework on how to manage, each each complaint or each concern. And oftentimes in the mediation process, as part of, the outcomes or the agreed outcomes, the two parties are actually generating a framework to, I guess, to support them when they do go back into the workplace. And that's, it's a great next step, I guess, to be able to have that longevity and maintain the agreed outcomes that they both, mutually agree on. So from there, my next slide is I guess around how do you actually empower employees, and this is probably more from the perspective of a manager. How do you empower your staff to manage that conflict? This can also be relevant, as part of the mediation process. How do you get them to think about self-managing these issues? Because I guess issues will arise from time to time. That is a fact of life, and that is part of a workplace environment that, you're working with different people, different personalities, different styles. So there are bound to be, issues that will arise over time. So I guess it's how do you manage it yourself, or how do you equip them to manage it yourself? And I think that's really a nice piece to add on as part of the workplace mediation, is to, I guess when they do reach a level of agreement on how they are going to behave or interact, or what their expectations are moving forward, that is coming from a place of ownership, accountability and responsibility, which is, I guess, above the line thinking, which is, that you are being professional and respectful of each other as an employee, and that there are things that you both can agree on how to control this situation yourself. And that's really a great feeling. Generally, people that do enter workplace mediation may be quite anxious and really not sure of how this will go, but by the end of it, in most cases, they will feel better, because there is a level of accountability here that is not blamed on one person or the other. They're both equally accountable and responsible, and take ownership for what they can as to what led to this situation, to, I guess, to the degrade of the relationship. And so that can be really empowering for them. And I guess the flip side, I guess, would be, that victim mentality, or, below the behaviour, which is the blaming, and I guess excusing yourself or the other person because of the behaviour. And denying is another one, denial of that. And look, it's, I guess, they're the barriers that have created the conflict. So you can shift the perspective once the barriers are taken down, or they're eroded, I guess. And I think that can only come from really speaking to the impact that has had on them individually, and then, acknowledgement of that, and then from there moving to a place of, well, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to move forward now that we have acknowledged that there's been, an impact or a hurt, or a negative impact on each other. It's then, utilising that information and moving forward and taking that ownership, and that's really what leads to, if there is an agreement, and capturing that agreement is that final piece to the workplace mediation facilitation. And I think that is, the crux of where the mediation will sit, is usually above the line strategies, to give them that empowerment to take that responsibility. Which leads me to a question around the feedback. So giving and receiving feedback. I feel like it's easy to give feedback sometimes. So for some people it is, some people it's not, actually. Because sometimes you have to give feedback, but whether it's positive or negative feedback. And then sometimes you've got to be able to receive it as well. So I think a key thing from that is, as long as it's constructive rather than critical, I think that's sort of the key here. But I'll open it up to the forum. Do you recall a time when you had to give feedback and it felt uncomfortable, or receive feedback that felt uncomfortable? Does anybody have any personal experiences?
I think often as a mediator, you're in that uncomfortable zone. It's focusing on maintaining neutrality. You still have to be more critical, perhaps, of one party than the other, and you just need to make sure that that's balanced. I think it's really important that the parties recognise your impartiality, and sometimes that's difficult when it's blatant that one party has not behaved perhaps as well as they should have.
Yeah, that's very true. Yes, you're right, Jo. I think that's as a media, definitely it's there are going to be situations where it is going to be much more difficult to remain impartial, but it is, I guess, the skill that we have as a mediator is to still not make either one feel, that they are more or less, responsible. I think that the thing is, that's right, to make sure it's balanced, and that can also be attributed to making sure that they get equal opportunity to speak around their issues or concerns, and to share any specific examples of that, and to make sure that it is equalised. You're right. Yeah.
I just want to jump in as well. In terms of feedback, also language is really important.
Yeah.
And also cultural considerations. So I work in an Aboriginal organisation, and the way that you address elders is different as well, especially in a feedback process. So yeah, it is something also to be mindful of.
Thank you for sharing this. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Do you have any insights there, Ebony? Because
Yes.
it would be great to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I work with an elder, so she's our cultural connector, and we do sometimes see things differently, and I need to also consult to her a lot of the time, just making sure we are keeping culturally safe with our clients, and providing that safety and space for them. A lot of the time, if I'm having an issue with her process or something, I find culturally I can't directly come to her. I have to go through a different manager. So it's just the way it kind of works and just the way it runs here. It's just also culturally appropriate. So yeah, because for me, if there is a conflict or an issue, I like to go directly to that person, which has kind of backfired here in a way, because it's just not the way it works. And, every organisation is different in the way they do that. So that's, it hasn't worked culturally here, but I know in other workplaces it's probably, the right thing to do. So that backfired on me pretty because I'm like that. I'm like, hey, we got an issue, let's talk about it. But this person was like shut down and ran to HR, and was like, Ebony can't do that. And yeah, it was
Yeah.
So I think culturally being aware, and also just use of language and the way you approach, especially with feedback, really important.
Yeah.
I don't know if that explains it, but
yeah, it does. That's really really helpful protocols in organisations. Sorry, it's just really interesting.
It's interesting. I think I'm just reflecting on. I had one quite recently, which was between two First Nations employees, and I'm getting more of those types of workplace mediations, but they're asking culturally sensitive and aware mediators. So I think it's definitely an area to be, to expand our understanding, so we know how to approach and manage that sort of a mediation, more effectively. So yes, there is more involved, and again, yes, it can go a long way to have that awareness.
Definitely.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I might keep plodding along. I'm conscious of the time. Okay, so it brings me to, I guess, the second topic, if you like, which is just expanding on the workplace mediation process, which is like I spoke about before, as a mediator, we're coming in as a neutral third party to create that safe space for the two participants or more, to be able to discuss openly with each other, what their main issues or concerns are, and I guess creating a really, helping them create a productive and more collaborative working relationship. Sometimes, in my experience, they've potentially had a good working relationship. Not all the time, but sometimes that is the case. And so therefore, it is about trying to rebuild it again to get to maybe not the same, but something that is again professional and productive and respectful to each other. And then you can get to a place where they can collaborate more effectively with one another again. And that also depends on what they're willing to agree or commit to moving forward. So if there's been effective, I guess, unpacking of the issues, and they feel heard and they feel like it's been acknowledged by the other person, then generally, we find that they will move to a place where there is a mutual agreement on certain areas that they've found to be difficult or challenging, and really can reset that working future relationship. So I think that is the beauty of a workplace mediation, if done, if done appropriately, in the right circumstance. So I think that leads me to, I guess, the first step in a workplace mediation is, understanding the issue from the individual's perspective, and really giving them, that confidential space to talk about it, so that you can understand it from their point of view. So I think, that is imperative. So to have that first step, which we call the pre-mediation or the intake session, and that pre-mediation intake session is that space where the individual can openly, communicate to the mediator what those issues are for them and why they've been an issue for them, and really even start that unpacking process, with the mediator there. And the mediator can also then, explain what a workplace mediation involves, and what that looks like, and what to expect, when they do meet in their joint session, and also the role that the mediator will be playing, which is obviously as a neutral third party, they're not there to take a side or not to determine, who's right or who's wrong. It's simply to provide, that a neutral facilitator to enable these conversations, and have some difficult conversations moving forward. And I think a good one is to ask them, certain questions, or think about the reason why the issue hasn't been sorted out, why they feel like it's not been possible for them, what is the block, what is the barrier there, and what they would like to get or achieve from the mediation process as well. What outcomes are they actually seeking? What would be a good outcome or outcomes for them? And really, taking that opportunity to almost, I guess, prepare them and coach them for having, getting the most out of that mediation for them. And so, yeah, that comes from outlining, the expectations moving forward, and what the expectation of the workplace mediation entails. So that leads me to, I guess, step one, which is, explaining the mediation from point of view of, yes, the role that the mediator will be playing, but also what their role is. Their role is to be able to listen to each other, actively listen to one another, not interrupt, and have an open conversation around those issues and share those issues or concerns with the other person. So if they can reach that level of understanding of what their role is and what the mediator's role is, that usually is a good starting point of explaining, what that is. And of course, the logistics around the mediation is good to unpack or determine with them there. Often we go on site to do the mediation, as long as both parties feel that is fine for them. To have it on site, obviously in a private meeting room or a boardroom or a small meeting space is fine, as long as they feel like they can safely and confidentially speak to one another in that space. Otherwise, we can always opt for off-site mediation space. And then there's also virtual mediations that are also sometimes done because, well, the two participants actually work remotely. So that's been something, I guess, post-COVID that we've experienced a lot of as well. And so parties are either working remotely, working from home all the time, or most of the time, or they're working in different states. So yeah, just talking to them about the logistics of that mediation and what the process is after mediation. Often I get asked that actually. So what happens next? What's the next step after this? And so, we explain to them that once the mediation is completed, a copy of that mediation agreement, if any is or are reached, is given to their manager or the person who requested the mediation so that they can continue supporting them with the agreed outcomes, and it helps to keep everybody on the same path and makes sure that the agreements are maintained and supported by their manager and reminded from time to time how things are going. Is there an improvement? If there's not, what other things are needed? Sometimes it's identified that they need a bit more training or they need a bit more coaching support or something like that. So that can be a follow-on or a post-mediation next step. The rules of engagement, generally most people are aware of the rules of engagement, but it's always good to remind them of that, as with any mediation, that there are ground rules and the ground rules are there to keep them safe. And the expectations of that are that they speak to each other with respect and give each other the opportunity to speak, not talk over them, that sort of thing. And obviously be aware of the language and tone and volume, and being aware of that. And of course, as a mediator, we're there to make sure that they do feel safe throughout that mediation. And it's our role to be able to intervene if things are not being adhered to in terms of the rules of engagement, and just reminding them and resetting them again to work and speak to each other in that sort of respectful way. They also have the ability to terminate the mediation at any point in time. It's a voluntary process, it's a voluntary intervention process. So, making sure that they are here of their own free will. Being a workplace mediation, sometimes, not that they're forced into having a mediation, but I guess sometimes, that they might feel like there is no other option but to go through a mediation process. But again, reminding them that they do have the ability to terminate. They have the ability to request for a break, or as many breaks as they require. Have an opportunity or opportunities to ask to have a one-on-one private session with the mediator, and that can often reset things as well. So I find with workplace mediations, the private session is really important actually to recalibrate and reset things and reality test through some options to move forward, and then often that after that, they generally tend to reach a point of how do we move forward and some outcomes there. So safety, keeping us safe through the process is all part of all the other, items there. The second step in mediation is, of course, understanding the issues or issue. generally there's more than one, but sometimes they're also overlapping each other. But really, asking them what the real issue is for them, or what the issues are for them, with the other individual, and trying to get them to even clarify why they think it has not been resolved. What are the barriers again for that taking place or happening? And again, getting them to reflect on what they would like to get out of the mediation is also part of that session, understanding it. On to the third step, which is outlining the expectations, which touches upon again, what the expectation is on how they interact and behave in the mediation, how to do that, so that there is productive conversations, how to have difficult conversations but still remain respectful, and just being able to understand, that the time that we dedicate to the mediation is structured in a way so that, nothing is left, not to be addressed. This is their opportunity, I guess, to really address the things they want to with each other. And it's created so that, it's done over a period of time. Usually it's 3 hours, which is ample time to go through, what their main issues or concerns are, and problem solving, towards a resolution after that. I've got this lovely, the mediation diamond diagram, that I use still to this day, probably in every mediation. I think it just clearly sets out how the time is broken up, and structured. So starting with the opening from the mediator, so just an opening introduction, talking about, in that step would be talking about the expectations of their role, the mediator's role explained, the confidentiality around the conversations and discussions. Being that it's a workplace mediation, when they do sign a pre-mediation agreement, which generally is around the confidentiality of what is discussed, should remain within the space of the two individuals and their manager. They can talk to the manager about it, and obviously somebody that is a support person for them outside of the workplace. They've got an option to bring a support person to mediations in the workplace. However, it's very rare that a support person is brought, because it is an informal intervention, and it also could sometimes debilitate the level of discussion that can happen. And you also need both parties to consent to each other's support person. So it often is not necessary to have a support person. I've had a situation where they've gone off and spoken to their support person during the break, or asked for a break, and then that is an opportunity for them to get that emotional support if they do need it. But it's, oftentimes, as a mediator, we serve, or we are, as a support person, act as a support person to both of them, because we're not there for either one, we're there for both of them, in a mutual capacity. So we start off with the opening, quick opening introduction to explain what to expect, and all their, the ground rules on how they are to interact with one another. Confidentiality and things like that is talked about there. And then we would go on to invite the individual opening statements from each of the parties, which in turn leads to setting the agenda items for discussion or exploration, and the bulk of the time is really done, or spent around understanding and exploring the agenda items or the issues raised by both parties. Generally, on average, we end up with 6. I generally ask them to think about their top 3 issues, and that generally is a good amount, and then anything that comes from unpacking those issues, they can talk to that during the exploration phase. Once they have adequately talked about all the agenda items and explored them, shared examples and whatnot, and tried to really understand each other's perspectives, and experiences, from there, I will offer generally the private session option. And as I said, it's really helpful and it's a really good reset tool, and an opportunity for them to have, a private conversation with the mediator to be able to, maybe reality test, maybe discuss some options, that sort of thing, with the mediator, and just to reflect on what was said, and that sort of thing. So that's really important, I think, the private session. And then following on from that, it is about option generation. So working out what they're proposing from each other, and suggestions that they make, and seeing whether there is any agreements on those, and we spend the remainder of that time problem solving and trying to come to an agreement around those problems or issues. And if they do, then we draft the agreement with them and get them to sign or initial it, if possible. And then, that's the closure, or the conclusion of the mediation session or process. So it is a great little tool to really outline how that time will be spent. And I think it's good. It sort of goes through, the top part of the initial stage is around the past, and then after the private session, we're looking into the future. And that's really, a good way to move forward through everything that is said and done. We now have to kind of draw that line in the sand, if you like. So this is probably, looking at the time, I won't go through too much of this in detail, but I've already kind of talked through all of these points around the opening introduction. Yes, it's very short, but it basically sets the tone. I think that's what I want to highlight. It sets the tone for the workplace mediation, because the expectations are set out clearly, the process is explained to the parties or the individuals, and it basically, really allows for them to feel comfortable to open up and just, speak about their top 3 concerns, or the main concerns from their perspective, and which leads nicely into, allowing them to have an opening statement is giving them the, empowering them to be able to talk about what the top 3 or the main 3 things are for them, that have been really challenging. And, it's a statement, so it's not something that is, requesting engagement from the other person. It's just, these are the things that I really find challenging. And I would love to address these today and try and get some, ways to move forward from here. So, yes, so I think that's a good way to start that off, which then leads into getting a clear agenda on what the issues are. Media can really capture that for them and make sure that it is captured according to what they're intending. And it's really working with the individuals, on how to set up that agenda on what they really want to address with each other today, or on the day. So it is, it's not rigid, it is definitely flexible, but it just provides a level of focus on making sure that they stick to those particular issues, which are the main ones for them. And then, of course, once you've set the agenda, you explore those agenda items, and that's where I spend the bulk of the time, really. It's really parking any previously made judgments about one another, and really exploring these issues and coming at it from a very curious mindset. I try and kind of get them to do it from that sort of perspective, which means, hopefully they're less critical and less, already jumping to the conclusion of what in the past they might have. But today they're trying to park that for the moment, for the time being, and really hear that other person, but also share their personal impact as well. And it just enhances, the ability to understand one another, when it feels like there's a lot of disappointment and frustration and anger even, around some of the issues. And so they need to feel heard, and they need to feel acknowledged, and that can come through that exploration phase. So to do that, obviously, it's really enhancing on those micro skills, active listening, reframing a statement or a question, or reframe it for them so they can see it from an alternate perspective. And obviously, checking in as well with each other to make sure that they've understood it correctly, or, that if there is more explanation required, do they need further information to clarify or understand that better? And then obviously responding rather than reacting is another good little tip or a skill to build on through this mediation or through the workplace mediation process. And just quickly, option generation is just, I guess, focusing then after you've had the private session is focusing on some options to generate solutions. And that is really that future focused perspective that you're trying to get them to look at, to work together to find something that is acceptable. How do you move forward from here? How do you address these issues that you've both raised? What do you suggest would be a way to do that? Getting them equally involved in those discussions around what are some productive options that they can suggest to one another. And look, if they've done adequate exploration of the issues, I think the key thing here is that it's probably where you don't have to do as much work, because most of this is already generated through the discussions they've had previously. If they're able to engage in a constructive and open way, then generally they're talking about some solutions already by that point. So it's really, capturing it for them and how they want to intend it. Sometimes they might get stuck on a particular solution or option, and that's okay. Generally, that will be, an opportunity to really unpack it at that point without trying to drag the past, obviously being mindful that, because there's limited time, but also reminding them of the work that they've done to get to that point as well. Sometimes it's easy to kind of fall back into old habits or perspectives. So it's another opportunity to just remind them, how far they've come and how they can move forward with this without holding on to past resentment, anger, or disrespect. And just quickly, I guess, any draft agreements that are reached at that point will be captured by the mediator. I guess the aim is to put something, create something with them that is maintainable, that is long lasting, that is durable. And I guess that is a reflection of how well intended the parties are to reaching a level of agreement to be able to move forward, and how much commitment they are putting into this. And generally, they are committed because they get a say in what that looks like. So there's, I guess, a real ownership to that. And, it is about resetting expectations. And generally by that stage, they've worked so hard to get to that point, they will, they will do the best that they can to be able to move forward and be invested in this. And I think another way of maintaining that any agreements reached is to have that manager also be on board and be of what they agreed on, and letting them know that this will also go to your manager so that they can help support you in maintaining those agreed outcomes. And I think that's where, Envero, we pride ourselves, I guess, with the, if you like it to call it a successful outcome, is when not only reaching agreement, because reaching agreement, is okay, but it's really maintaining that agreement and maintaining the things that they committed to, after some time, and that is done. We generally, check in and do a follow-up to check in to see how the relationship is going. Has it improved? Have those incremental steps been put in place, and have they actually improved the overall working relationship? And generally, as I said, 87% of those mediations that we conduct or have facilitated end up, where the relationship has improved. And it's really the power of communication and having a really a robust but, a healthy and productive conversation facilitated by mediator if it needs that. So, I think I'm conscious of the time. Sorry, Jo, I've gone over. But I think just lastly, mediation as an intervention is, I think, prevention before it escalates, and skip that one. But I think most importantly, it can save, companies, organisations money, long-term costs, investigations, complaints processes, Fair Work Commission, going through the Fair Work Commission, even losing, employees, resignation, and then having to rehire, disruption to the team, and the impact on others. And most importantly, I think, for me, is that psychosocial risk. You basically can prevent that or reduce the impact it has on a person and both people's mental health and well-being, and which in turn then can impact performance and productivity as well. So yeah, I think that's it. I'm going to finish up there and thank everybody for listening to me today. So thank you.
Thank you, Zilla. That was excellent. Ebony, did you have a comment?
I don't know, but thank you. That was really good. Yeah. Yep. And I'd like to hear more about your processes and like working with First Nations clients.
Yeah.
So it'd be really good to chat.
To connect. Yeah, for sure.
Yes. Thank you.
I can put my email address. Let me do that.
Yes, please.
Yeah. And in the MI members, you can search for other members and connect there as well.
True. So, okay.
Yeah, that's another way. So Thilla, is Enverio still looking for more contractors, or you're okay at the moment?
Yes, look, we're always looking for contractors. I think, we're always open to doing, expanding our team. We are looking for, I think at the moment we've got Melbourne is looking good. Canberra, probably I don't know if anyone's in Canberra, live in Canberra. So yeah, that's probably, and maybe even Western Australia, Perth. But look, feel free to email me, and because things always change, and it just depends on who has availability as well. It will always fluctuate. So yes, happy to have a chat at any point in time.
And I think the settings, we're working on getting our settings right for Teams. We've just moved across from Zoom, so it looks like you weren't able to put anything into chat, but no. I can drop your so your Enverio email in there. Yeah,
sure, brilliant.
So I've just so Ebony or anyone, if you did want to reach out directly to Tilo, that's her email address.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It's really great to really go through in detail what's happening in workplace mediation, and for those that are more experienced or those that are newer to sort of see that look, we're doing mediation. What you learn in mediation, it actually works out in the real world. Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for those.
Thank you, Jo.
So look, what we'll put the recording up available for members, and I might just edit out the member contribution bits and just put the main presentation up on out on the public YouTube channel, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thanks, Jo. No worries.
No, okay, excellent. Oh, thanks everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jo.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.